Great. Greetings to everyone. Thank you so much for making the time to be a part of this webinar today. I'm Vahid Jahangiri with the International Lifeline Fund, and today I will be presenting a project that we recently completed in Uganda. Next slide, please. Our organization, it's a US-based organization who has been implementing projects in Sub-Saharan Africa and Haiti since 2006. And we have been involved in R&D, in design, in implementation, in setting up production and manufacturing facilities, training, and also monitoring evaluation. Historically, when we came to this space, our main goal was to address the needs in the emergency context or in conflict situations. But as the sector has evolved over the years, as we have gone through a lot of learning ourselves, we decided to be able to also to tweak our mission a bit and also be able to bridge the historical gaps in these both spaces of water and energy, not just as an implementing agency, but also as a thought partner and to be able to help other organizations to be able to have more successful programs on the ground. Next slide, please. So today's presentation is about a project that we did in Uganda. And I'm not sure, maybe some of you may not be familiar with the context in Uganda in the recent years, but there has been an influx of refugees for over 1 million that have been coming from South Sudan, from Congo, and elsewhere, which has created a very difficult situation, especially negative impacts on the environment and also increasing conflict with the host community in some of the areas. So we wanted to design a program essentially to see how we can address different aspects of the context on the ground. And in designing our programs, we also don't want to look at just the immediate terms, but what can we do together with the community and with the local government and all the stakeholders to be able to plant the seeds and build the foundational aspects of a project that can actually have a much more impact in the long term. So within this project, we wanted to look at increasing livelihood and resilience, and at the same time be able to reduce biomass dependency, and at the same time to look at how we can develop the community asset to be leveraged for long-term economic growth. And in the process of this, what were the possibilities to also nurture markets and create demand for energy, affordable energy products in order to reduce this dependency on biomass and be able to create better livelihoods and jobs for the people in these different locations in Uganda. And also in this process, one thing that is also important for us is also to look at the psychosocial aspect of what is happening on the ground. Essentially, many people who come to these refugee camps are women and girls. And it was very important for us to design our program in such a way that is just not us giving out a gadget, but also there is a process where we can also have a positive impact in the psychosocial aspect of the program. Next slide, please. The target location in Uganda was basically 5 areas. Which 3 of them were the refugee settlements along with the host communities in those areas. And there were also 2 other districts in the Karamoja region, which is the northeastern part of Uganda, which has faced drought for many years and is one of the poorest locations of Uganda. So we wanted to make sure that we are not just targeting refugees, but we are also targeting the host community and also other areas where it's not necessarily a refugee area, but where our program can also have an impact in these locations. Next slide, please. Now, I don't expect you to read all of this, but I wanted to just give you a quick overview about what was delivered in this project in about a 6 to 7 months period. Within this project, we for sure were targeting the households and also the institutions, the schools, because the schools is definitely an area where you have a significant amount of biomass that is being used by schools on an everyday basis. So to design a program that was not just on for the household level, but also at the institutional level, where you can also address these other areas within these locations. At the same time, we were able to build a very close relationship with all the district level government agencies in order for them to really be a part of the process. Because if they're not part of the process, then the ownership in the long term may not be there. In addition, we built energy kiosks, and these energy kiosks, the main goal of these energy kiosks was to see if we can, in fact, build markets and for the products actually to have demand and to have adoption. Because if you just go out and you just give out 2,000, 3,000 stoves, and that's not going to really be effective in the long term. And of course, to see how we could increase the consumer demand in regards to the awareness of deforestation and also their energy needs. Next slide. Now, what I really like to focus actually this presentation on is on the learnings, on the successes and also the challenges and what we learned. So this can be something useful also for your programs that you're doing or you're planning to do. Next slide, please. So the first thing in any kind of project, and also in this respect to this project, was really focusing on building trust with the communities and with everybody who's involved in these areas, including the local government. And what's really important is that when you start these type of projects, you really have to understand who is the community. What do they exactly need? What is their culture? What is the dynamics of the local leadership and the stakeholders? And what is the communication ladder among all of these stakeholders in these various refugee settlements or the host communities? Because if you cannot build this trust, it will be very difficult for the project in the long term to have a sense of to have ownership, and it will undermine everything you're doing. So it wouldn't matter if you have the best stove or if you have the best cooking solution. This trust component is a very, very important aspect of any kind of a program, and I cannot put enough emphasis on this. Now, once you have this trust, this is where you can really see who are the local ambassadors, who are your local champions, or the superheroes that can help you with a project. Because these are the people who are in the community, who understand the dynamics, who know what resources are available, and we will be great, let's say, ambassadors to be able to mobilize people and to increase ownership of the project in the long term. Next slide, please. The next thing is really on the technology, which Krista mentioned some of the key important points when you are planning to do a project like this. For us, we already have been working in Uganda for a very long time. So we had a very good understanding of the context and the cooking habits and the cooking cultures. And given that we had worked with the South Sudanese and the Congolese populations before, we already had a very good idea about what is it that they really need and how do they go about preparing their food. What's important is that the technology must work, because if the technology does not work, there will be no adoption. In regardless of how much we think a particular technology can have high efficiency or it's clean or it makes a lot of sense for it, let's say in a laboratory, but reality is the field. The technology has to work at the field level. And cooking culture in every country is very, very different. As we cannot go to Italy and tell the Italian people to cook their pasta in a microwave, we also cannot go to a particular culture and tell them to completely change their cooking habits. It's just not reality. So we look at fit, we look at form, we look at function before we decide to deploy a particular technology to the field. Now, what's important for you to know is that if you're deciding to have a cook stove program, you really also want to make sure that that particular technology has had some kind of a track record and it was actually tested at the field level. Because if it was not tested at the field level, then the probability of failure can be very high. And we have seen this over and over in at least 10 countries in this past 13 years. With our program, because we already had this deep knowledge of the cooking culture, we had adoption of 97%. And so that's where you want to be. Next slide, please. Now, if you don't have the right technology, as you can see in these photos, you either will end up with a solar cooker graveyard, and that photo is from the Dadaab refugee camp, or you will have your stove to be sold as a scrap metal, or as you can see in the picture to the left, it will be put on the top of a hut to protect from the rain, or to be used as a chimney. And that's a brand new stove that was given to a refugee household in Ethiopia, actually. This is not what we want to see. What we want to see are successful projects. But this is why context analysis and understanding who ultimately the user is and who the community is, it's extremely important. Next slide, please. Another very, very important that led to success of our project in Uganda, or for any program, wherever you work, is training. But how do you go about training is extremely important. Training not in a way that we just go with a clipboard and expect that people are going to understand what we are telling them. People have different educational backgrounds. People, just like us, have different learning curves. So for us to have a very, let's say, successful project, we need to make the training very creative. People need to see actually visually that the stove can cook the food that they prepare on daily basis. So if you are in Uganda, maybe you're making posho and beans, or you're Kenya, you're making ugali, or if you're in Congo, you're making fufu, or if you're in Haiti, you're making maybe rice and beans. But people need to see that the stove can perform boiling or simmering or making stews or even barbecuing. So we spent a lot of time and energy in creating the training in such way that people are very, very focused. So a lot of times in the training sessions, we don't have 100 people or 200 people. Maybe we have only 20 or 25 people. Now, it takes much longer time from implementation point of view, but it will definitely contribute to a much higher success rate for your programs. And this was definitely, I would say, an element that really contributed to the adoption of the 97%. Next slide, please. Now, if the technology is right and if the training is right, it will have an impact on gender. In our case, in Karamoja, which is a very, very difficult place to have any sort of adoption given the context on the ground, the men saw the value in the stove. And the men took the interest to actually even start cooking, as you can see in these photos. This is something actually that we had never seen before, at least in Uganda. And this was a very, very positive indicator for us that the more we have people involved in the process, the more we can reach our goals. So this again goes back in the way we communicate, in the way we share the information, in the way people can actually see something can work and it has a value in their lives, whether they're men or women, it doesn't matter. And to have men involved in this process makes a lot of difference, and it makes it a lot easier for women to be able to make decisions regarding what kind of a cooking technologies that they need. Next slide, please. Now, this comment was not for this particular project, but as you can read, a donor came back to us, and in 2017, this is before we actually implemented this project, and told us, well, ILF, you guys are great. You have a great technology on the ground, but we go out to the camps and we see stoves that are either in some storage collecting dust that are your stoves, or people are not using your stoves. So this tells us whoever purchased the stove from you did not conduct the training for them. And this is very true. And this is really a message to the donors, actually. We cannot fund programs without training. We cannot just fund gadgets. It's very, very difficult to provide these technologies and not provide training and expect that we're going to be successful. And so this is very important, and we want to make sure that in any kind of a technology deployment, we include training as a requirement, not as an option. Next slide, please. Another very important aspect of any time that you are implementing this type of or any kind of a program, I'll say in general, is to have continuous monitoring on the ground. This monitoring, the way we go about our monitoring is that after we distribute the stoves with training, we do basically a 3-phase monitoring. We do a training 1 or 2 weeks after people have received their stoves. Then we do another monitoring after 1 month, after 3 months, and after 6 months. Each phases of this monitoring gives you a lot of information and also enables you to tweak your project if it's needed and if you have to make any kind of a course correction. In our case, what happened was in one of the locations, we learned through our monitoring that the people were not using the stoves. Then we learned that actually the people that were coming to the training were not the real users of the stoves. They were just the other people in the household who were not even involved in cooking, or they were neighbors. But we were able to do a course correction and going back to the community and retraining the people that were actually responsible for cooking and be able to rectify that issue. The point here is that it's not just we just go out and give a stove and do a training and we say goodbye and think that everything's going to be okay. We need to continuously, as our UNHCR colleague mentioned earlier, to monitor our project during the implementation to make sure that there is the level of adoption, or if there's any questions that we need to address, we'll be able to help the users with. Next slide, please.
Vahid?
Yes.
Since we are over time, is it possible to wrap in the next 1 or 2 minutes?
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah, you can actually go to the next slide. The one other thing is very important that we have seen over the years, that one stove is never enough. We ourselves have a lot of cooking appliances, therefore it's very necessary that we also, if we really wanted to address, let's say, deforestation, one stove is just not really going to address what we think that we can achieve by providing just one technology. Next slide, please. The last thing that I'd like to mention is that if you do have success from your technology and your training, then you can have early impact, which in our case was very visible. And that really helped to build more trust with the community and also to be able to put the foundational elements to be able to have a scale up in future. And the last, just one more slide, please, and I'll wrap up here. And this slide is very important because this is really the bridge that we have to make from, let's say, free distribution and to creating markets. And this is on its own, is a webinar on its own, but it's possible, and we were able to do this, and it's all about the methodology that you need to have to make sure that this can be a success. And I can finish here. The last 2 slides are just more informational slides that you can read at a later time.